Oh, hi there. This is the podcast that floats down here. Melissa, our Stephen King veteran, Ben, the It fanboy, and Luke, who is a Stephen King noob, are really excited for you to join us. Thanks for being here and get ready to float down here.
The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
All right, we need to move along. I have a 7 a.m. dentist appointment.
Oh, this is rough.
The last one will go quick, I know.
The last one will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try to go. Let's make this one go quick. This one.
But it's Tom.
Okay, we are recording.
Here we go.
We are continuing our trek through Chapter 12 of Part 3 Grown-Ups. Chapter 12 is The 3 Uninvited Guests. We're doing sections 3, 4, and 5. This set of sections is 11 pages, and that is 1.01% of this book. All right, Melissa, kick us off here.
Kay McCall tried to call the police, but couldn't. Even the doctor in the emergency room couldn't convince her to spill. Kay is defeated and embarrassed, and beaten to a pulp. See, Tom Rogan called, looking for his Beverly. When Kay wasn't worried that Beverly was missing, Tom took that as a sign that Kay was the partner in crime Beverly used to orchestrate her disappearance. Determined to teach Kay a lesson, Tom beat the living daylights out of her, and broke her silence when Tom threatened to destroy her face. Once Tom left, and Kay got herself patched up, she began to call every hotel listed in Derry, hoping to warn Beverly of the incoming Tom. After his success with Kay, Tom headed to the airport and caught a flight to Bangor, Maine. Not able to rent a car, and still looking pretty beat up from his encounter a few days ago with Beverly, he found a cheap car for sale in the classified ads. Tom bought the car, stole a license plate off a car in the long-term parking lot, and headed toward Derry.
Tom, this is fun.
So Tom is too damn smart for his own good. The fact that he knew Kay helped Bev simply because of what she didn't ask on the phone. We knew from way back in chapter 3 when we first met him that he was an evil sumbitch, but now he's a crazy, evil, smart sumbitch, and that's the worst kind.
Yeah, he's always shown some intelligence, at least in manipulation, right? I mean, that's been the main thing that we've seen from him. But this is like a different level. Like that's using your context clues pretty well.
Yeah.
This goes right into his strengths.
That goes above and beyond being a master manipulator and psychological abuser.
Because, the note that I have for later in the chapter, but it fits right here. Another obvious sign of a sociopath is knowing that you're using your knowledge to control the situation. And he even says, I had psychology training and everything, and I used that against her. I knew how to play that, and I knew how to get what I wanted. Flat out sign of a sociopath where, a psychopath, you're just crazy. A sociopath, you're crazy, but you know it and you know how to use it. And so that's why they're more dangerous than even just psychopaths.
Very Sherlock Holmes of him.
A high-functioning sociopath. I know it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Kay.
Most are.
Let's talk about Kay. Poor Kay. I like Kay.
Go for it. What do you got on? What do you got on Kay there, Melissa?
Just that I like her. I mean, at the moment, because my only real comment on her is what happens at the very end of our perspective on her. So if you guys got anything on her before we switch to Tom's perspective.
Yeah. So I do have a few things on her. I do feel for her immensely. Because in the first chapter we met her in, even Bev calls her kind of an uber feminist, like the top of the top, most men are evil. And even she says, if it wasn't for this one doctor, he's the only one that I wanted to talk to. Besides that, all other men can just fuck off. But even
she says they can all die.
Yeah.
Yes, they can. It's okay.
But her fear for her face and her beauty, it's one of those just natural instincts, and not just because she's a woman and not because of vanity. It's just that that's why she hates herself even more internally, I think, unjustifiably so, but because she sold out, quote unquote, her friend for her own vanity reasons, because she was even like, Bev, he was threatening my face and all this. And you can tell that she hates herself because she is that feminist, that it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter, all this, but in the end that, failed her, she kind of fell back on her, what she, on her thought process, on her normal mentality. And I think that's where a lot more of her pain is coming from, is the failure of a friend for something along those lines.
I'm completely with you on several thoughts that you touched on. She feels like she betrays Bev here, again, unjustifiably, but it's due to the face cutting is what it kind of was the final straw, right? That's what breaks her. It's one thing to get knocked around. It's one thing to get her shoulder ripped out of its socket. There's a visceral reaction that Kay specifically has to her face getting cut and left on the floor. Not just cut. He was talking about cutting it off. Right. That's a whole different level of brutality. I'm agreeing with you. Like, that is a fucked up thing that at the point that she's at right there, she believes him. And she has every right to believe him because of the other things that he's doing. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of thoughts on Kay. She is really not recognizing herself as the battered woman, this time. Like, everything that we've seen with her previously has been fighting for Bev, wishing that Bev would kind of come out and fight against what Tom had been very clearly doing to her for years and years and years that Kay knew about. But she wanted Bev to basically say it and take the power for herself. Am I wrong on that?
Keep going.
So I'm highly unqualified to talk about this, but I'm going to try. So we'll see where this goes. But so that was my first kind of thought, is she's not recognizing herself at the beginning of this chapter as a battered woman. She has a hard time believing that because she's never necessarily been in that position. So I think this is kind of an eye-opening thing for her. But go ahead.
Okay, so that I was just trying to get clarity on what you meant by battered woman. And in my head, it sounds like you're using that term to be a woman who's had her ass kicked by a man.
Similar to what Bev has gone through. Yes.
Okay. I completely disagree with your definition.
Okay.
To me, what she's not recognizing herself as, or I think what you're seeing is how the doctor is seeing her as a battered woman, as in somebody who willingly put herself in a relationship with somebody who does this to her, and then she's not reporting him. That is not what is happening to Kay at all. Kay did not choose Tom. Kay did not choose to put herself in that situation. And she's not reporting Tom, not for the same reasons Bev didn't. It's a very different scenario than a domestic abuse case. This was not domestic abuse.
I agree. My next note here, because I think I think there are some similarities that Kay has her eyes opened up to with this interaction for domestic abuse relationships that she has experienced from the outside. That's my main kicking off. I think she sees what Bev went through in a little bit different light, and due to this.
Yes, and I can see, I can understand exactly where both of you guys are coming from, and agree with both of you. And Melissa, you're right on the batter thing. That's the wrong terminology, but it's where Luke's coming from is the right mentality. But she sees the fear that Bev has gone through because she knew, she called the police on Tom, but now as soon as he comes back from jail or whatever, he's going to kill her. And so she's realizing that even in that aspect, Bev was afraid to do anything because as soon as he gets out, because he's going to get out, she's dead, or she's worse than dead, kind of thing. And that's where Kay's fear comes from, because Tom says, if you call the police, they may arrest me, but I'll bond out and I'll come back and they'll find your tits on the floor and your eyes in the fishbowl. That's going to freak anyone out, And so with it, she's realizing, what Bev as a battered, an ongoing domestic abuse victim has been through, because Tom's told her that over and over and over again. That's not the first time he's ever said that. As smooth as it come out, that's not the first time he said that or made that threat.
So getting to the point that Melissa had on the doctor's perspective of Kay here when she shows up, right? It's pretty obvious that she's had the shit kicked out of her. And the doctor immediately goes into, well, this is a pretty standard domestic abuse case. This is way more complicated than that. I actively know that. This, however many line note I have built up here hopefully describes that. But, the doctor is trying to get Kay to admit that this is abuse with like the standard, hey, I see this all the time, kind of downplaying it to show her confidence, which is not the right way of doing it. Because Kay is going through something way more complicated because of her own past and her own experiences with other women that have gone through this. And knowing what kind of a really strong feminist and strong woman character Kay believes herself to have always been and always was, I think right here, Kay is starting to question a little bit of her own treatment of other women that had been abused. Because we saw her right when Bev comes to Kay, and says that she left him. I got the feeling that Kay had been in situations where other women had done things like that, and she immediately goes into the why the fuck don't you just say something kind of attitude. Like, we know this is going on, you know this is going on, you're not fooling anybody, stand up for yourself and take the power back. Which is, I get it, but this is the first time she's seeing or even having to realize that how much easier it is to fight for somebody else, and it's not as easy to fight for yourself sometimes in situations kind of like this. And maybe I'm completely missing a point here, but I think it's an unfortunately eye-opening experience for Kay to give her perspective on where other women have been that she has judged in the past because of her own strong woman character. That's the main point that I'm trying to get to.
I don't know if she's ever judged other women for it. I mean, I think there's definitely oh my God, get out and help yourself. But it's not a judgment so much as it's a wish for them, because I would do that.
But it still comes across, at least from what I read previously, it comes across as judgment because you wouldn't think that if without some kind of why can't you just do this thought process, which is wrong.
I'm trying to understand your perspective, and I can see how you came to that conclusion, and I feel like there's this underlying tone that's missed in that every woman can be attacked by any man, or at least, I mean, not any man, but every woman is vulnerable to a man at some point in this kind of way. That's like the underlying fear of being a woman. And that's for centuries how society has raised men. And I am not out there saying that every single man is a domineering asshole like Tom is. I don't mean that. But it's the idea that men are dominant, men are in charge, men are the boss. And some guys take it too far. And Tom is obviously one of those guys, but he's more common than you realize. And maybe not to his extreme because, Stephen King, but that kind of attitude and behavior towards women, it's every day. And I think it doesn't matter how feminist or non-feminist you are, a guy like Tom is going to take it out on a girl, any girl, at any time, if they stand in her way. And that's how I took it more. And I think it's that idea of, for me, it's less about understanding the perspective of the woman who had to live through it and more just realizing her own vulnerability because she thought she was so tough. It's coming back to that realization of, like, all the damn men, they can all die. And that's why. Because, yeah, Tom is far end extreme, but he's not alone. He's not even that uncommon. He's the most real scary thing in this book.
Yeah.
I think for me as a woman reading this part, it's very difficult because it is less about Kay questioning herself because she's changing her perspective on how the women feel because, I feel bad, I wasn't more understanding, and more like, men do this, men can do this, and we can't do anything to stop them. We have no control, no matter, and it's a really damn scary feeling. And it's the feeling that, depending on your perspective and how aware of it you are, she's ignored in herself for so many years, thinking she was tough. And it's something, and I read this when I was much, much younger, and that's always in the back of my head walking down the street or anywhere, anytime I'm somewhere by myself. That could be me. And not that I'm doing something that some, woman's crazy husband is going to come get me, but it's that idea of simply because of size and societal norms, like women always have to be aware of their vulnerability around men, and Kay had forgotten. So she's having a hard time living with herself in that.
I completely agree with that. There's a lot, like I said, it's really, really complicated. That was just the one angle that I took on it, that I knew there were a lot more. I wasn't saying that's the one thing that she's dwelling on in her head. To me, it was more of just a one track. She probably also had a little bit of this going on as well. I completely agree that, yeah, this is eye-opening for her she was caught in her own, she thought she could handle it, or she thought she wouldn't be in this position kind of thing because of the life that she's led. She's put herself as this feminist pro thing, because she's been nationally recognized as that type of person, right? I mean, that's how she's so well off, essentially, writing books about that. And it cuts to the core of her that no matter, like you said, Melissa, no matter how feminist you are, you're still vulnerable to it. And that sucks.
I wonder what your perspective would be if she hadn't been written as a feminist and it was just a friend with the exact same storyline happen to her. Would you be focusing so much on that? Because
I don't think so. I honestly think it's the thought that I had was mostly based on how she treated Bev when Bev came to her. And yeah, she was a great friend to her, but it seemed like there was some inherent judgment of, why couldn't you do this beforehand? Like, we've been waiting for you to do this for all these years. That's the one thing.
I don't know. See, I just have a hard time with that thought, because I would do that. I'd be like, oh, thank God you're here. Thank God you made it here. Thank God you finally made this decision, because again, and maybe I read more like female perspective things. That's a common thing that happens, because you need to stay there and I think we talked about it in Bev's chapter. It's happening, but you can either choose to cut that out of your life completely, or you can choose to remain the friend, because at some point she's going to need you. And it's not so much a judgment. I truly don't see it as a judgment, simply because of like my perspective. If that was a friend of mine, I probably would do the exact same thing and say the exact same things in non-judgmental, but like oh, thank God you finally figured it out, because yes, I don't want you to die. I don't think it's a judgment. I think it's I've been waiting for you, and that's why I'm your friend, because I stayed.
Yes. However, what I think Luke's getting with it, where I'm kind of agreeing, because I do agree with you that she has that mentality of happy that you're safe and you're finally
it's definitely relief.
It's the perspective of the victim themselves. It comes across, and you don't mean it as a judgmental, but it comes across as, now you're saying, oh, well, everybody else saw this happening and knew this was happening, but we didn't say anything or couldn't do anything because you wouldn't have listened. But now you're listening, or now you're realizing, and it just comes as, a victim or whatever, of whatever circumstances. You don't want that Monday morning quarterbacking. You don't want that, even if you're trying to be supportive in that, you don't want to be made to feel more like a victim by feeling stupid for sticking with the choices you made. And so I think that's where Luke's coming from, of being the judgmental, quote unquote. Maybe she's not trying to be judgmental. She's trying to be supportive, but from the victim's perspective, she's judging me for not making this choice sooner. And so that's kind of where I think it could come from now, especially in this aspect where she doesn't want to tell the doctor about what happened. She's fearful of calling the police, like I said before, of what Tom had threatened. She can understand where the victim's coming from. She doesn't want the doctor telling her, hey, I've seen this, blah, 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 blah. She doesn't care about that, just like just like a victim doesn't want to be told, hey, we told you so, kind of thing. Even if they're not saying we told you so, but that's how it's perceived.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on a couple points that I was trying to make, Benj. In the final note that I wrote there was, it's a lot easier to fight on somebody else's behalf when you can see it from the outside. It's a lot harder to fight from within when it's your fight to fight. It's a much more difficult task, and I don't know that Kay knew that ahead of time until she's been so unfortunately thrust into this portion of the story.
I'm having a hard time. Where in the story does it say that she finally sees Bev's perspective?
You're muted,
I'm
Benj.
having a hard time. You guys have both said that, and I don't remember reading anything where she was like, oh, now I get it.
I don't think she does not specifically say it. I think just going through this experience and her doing the stereotypical things of not reaching out to the police and not admitting it to the doctor, when it's so blatantly obvious that that's probably what should happen, that's where I don't think she's actively realized it herself, that she's doing these things. and thought, oh, this is what it must be like for this is what it was like for Bev for all these years.
Yeah, I literally don't agree with you. I can't bring myself to say, oh, I agree with that, because I don't think it has anything to do with seeing Bev's perspective at all. I don't think it has anything to do with like the victim shaming. I think it's she doesn't want to die. She doesn't know what Tom is doing. And so she's trying to figure out what the best next step is. She's not denying that something happened. She's tried to call the police and then thought, oh, wait, he could come back. Okay, so what can I do? She's still trying to find something to do. She went straight to the hospital. She called all the hotels to warn Bev. And yeah, maybe that isn't enough, but she's doing something. And my guess would be, given a few more days, she might call the cops. You know what I'm saying? I don't think she's done. And I think her perspective is so different than a typical domestic abuse victim that it's very hard for me to agree with you that she's like that. I just don't see that happening.
And I completely understand where you're coming from, and I do agree with you, Melissa. She is doing what she feels she needs to. Calling the hotels is a step above what she, should or could be doing, or most normal people would be doing in that situation. I think going above and beyond, and doing that. I'm not trying to downplay anything that she went through or anything like that. I'm just saying because as Luke pointed out, she's not taking the steps because she called 8 times to the police station, they said, and hung up each time because she's fearful. You're right. But that's the exact same thing that victims of abuse, of any, mental, physical, mental abuse go through on a common daily basis.
So I think one thing that I didn't touch on that I think Melissa might be getting at is attributing even though it's very, very brutal and physical, it's a different emotional state for lack of a better term, standard domestic abuse. I hate that's even the way
true. That's the difference that I think
I know
perspectives are missing.
I'm literally saying that we didn't bring that into it. And it doesn't have the emotional weight of, well, I can't leave him because of all other reasons. Right. She has been brutally pulled into this, and I didn't mean to entirely equate those 100%. I think what I was trying to get into is this is Kay's first experience with the victim side of that. Not saying it's complete apples to apples, but it was just the first time that she's been on any side of that from what we've seen. That was the only thing. I have very, very much zero experience personally with any of this. That's just the one thing that I pulled from one of the very few elements that I thought could have been a part of what she was going with.
I mean, I agree with you. I think this is the first time she's ever been this blatantly a victim, and I think it very much pulls to her vulnerability. And regardless of whether or not Tom is going to come back or not, just the idea of having to admit that she's not as strong as she thought she was, that's a problem. Yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with going back and changing how she views what Beverly went through or changing any kind of judgment piece. So that, I think, was my biggest issue with what you guys were saying.
Yeah, so, and maybe I was still figuring it out while we were talking about it, and that's entirely fair, because I was missing certain perspectives, and that's, I think, very clear.
Because at the end of the day, somebody who's being beaten repeatedly over the years by somebody that they love is a lot different than a random jackass knocking on your door and kicking the crap out of you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're not even the same kind of physical response. Really, and I hate to, but it's like rape culture, right? Like, it's the difference between having that happen from somebody who you know, and then, or just randomly happening to you by a person that you don't know who, maybe a swimmer behind a dumpster, for lack of a better reference. Not that both things aren't terrible. They are ridiculous, but they have very different sets of
emotional
causes. And how do you deal with it? Because the fallout from your life, there's fallout from both, but the fallout looks very different when it's somebody that you know.
So let's talk about more teeth. Let's talk about Tom's teeth, right? He's called out as having jack-o'-lantern face at one point, and later has a ghoulish look to his face. I don't know, just after the comments that we had last section about the picket fence teeth. I thought that was an interesting, more teeth kind of being involved. And any thoughts on Tom's teeth?
Well, I'm trying to remember. Did she hit him in the face with any of those items? Like, did she bust him in the mouth?
I think it was Beverly.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying Beverly. That's what I meant. Did she, when she was chucking stuff at him, like, did she hit him in the mouth or?
I didn't go back and read that
Yeah.
chapter. It's not the easiest one to get through.
Yeah.
No.
So I was just wondering if the jack-o'-lantern is from her or if it's just. I would assume it's probably from her because
I assumed it was from her.
Yeah, he seems the type that would actually maintain his,
Yeah, I think that was definitely a recent development.
Yeah.
So, one more thing on Kay before we move on to Tom's perspective.
Mhm.
Everybody good with that?
Yep.
I think, so Kay lost a lot in this attack, right? Like, we've talked a lot about that. Calling main information line to let Bev know. I think that was like her first step at picking up a piece of herself and being able to say, okay, I can't do this yet, but I can do this. I can at least tell her and give her that heads up. So I think
exactly.
it's going to take a long time for her to start piecing herself back together. And that was the first step. And it was very nice.
And
so that was like my other.
Well, and then I was going to add on to that, Melissa, and then the call taker with the information was like, that's going to take some time, like being all blasé, you're really going to do all this. And then
Listen
she goes,
to your sister.
Yep.
Listen to your sister. And she's like, oh, and boom, just goes right into it.
Yep.
So there is that sisterhood of that, it's shit's going down. We got to protect.
Yep.
Can I have one more comment on the doctor interaction with Kay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he essentially uses that as like almost like a slight proposition to her, right? He kind of, right? He brings up I can bring out this bottle of bourbon strictly for medicinal purposes. And she was clearly, in her head, she'd already said that in a different situation, she probably would have taken him home.
Yeah.
It just seemed a little odd. Reminded me very.
I didn't take it like that. I took it as a celebratory drink.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't look at it as a proposition at all.
You're going to call the police. We're going to, do. I agree with you, Melissa, on that. My other note was that now that's definitely a throwback of the doctor pulls out a pack of smokes, lights one up, gives her one, and even though she doesn't smoke or whatever, and it's like in the doctor's office kind of thing. Just kind of a throwback to something you'd never seen today. But also, just thinking about it, where was I going to go with it? Doesn't she say that she only wanted to see him because she knew him? Like he's a friend of hers.
No, she met him there. Later on, she calls him the famous Geffen because she had already told us about him.
Okay, I gotcha. So
that's how I read it, at least.
I must have misread a part later, so that's fine. Okay.
And I really didn't think that was what Dr. Geffen was getting at. I just wanted to double check because I would have been surprised because he does seem like a pretty decent guy. So
the only decent guy who's not in the Losers Club, apparently.
Mike's dead. Some of the parents are decent.
Currently alive in 1985. I know. I thought about Mike's dead. He literally was the next name that popped in my brain.
What about
one
Richie's
dairy
parents?
cop, who's the son of the guy who found Georgie.
Gardner.
He's Gardner.
Okay, maybe the religious cab driver.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Even though he's a little morose now, right?
Yeah. All right, Tom.
There are so many awful things in this book. And Melissa basically already said this, but Tom is right up there, if not takes the cake.
And only because he's
the most real. Yeah.
Like
it's a true, actual real life terror. Yeah.
If you want to read a book that's basically like all Tom,
no thanks.
Stephen King's Rose Madder. I always bring it up when we talk about Tom. Stephen King's Rose Madder is an excellent foray into even more detail about spousal abuse.
Yeah.
Gerald's Game's not so bad either.
Okay.
Maybe we'll
Rose
take
Madder.
a break before we get into that one.
Yeah, no, I'm going to need a break. All right.
Yeah. So my note on Tom's section first of course Tom wouldn't give a shit about the actresses. No misogynistic asshole like him.
He remembers her from a Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah, remembers her from and the slasher flick. That Beverly came with, and he only cares about the crime dramas, monster movies, or chase flicks.
Let's be honest. I only like crime movies, chase flicks, and superhero movies
God,
too.
you're such a Tom.
Right.
You're
Because
the worst.
that's totally my personality.
But I mean, and so it's like one of those. Yeah, it's the way of nailing home. Like, he's not even willing to like watch a Lord of the Rings or a Harry Potter, because that's none of those, or a magical one, or it's anything. It's all realistic or a monster, like I said, slasher flick kind of thing. But yeah, of course, he's such a misogynistic asshole that. Oh wait, the only reason I remember is because she kind of looks like my wife. And wait, my wife knows her husband? That's kind of weird. And that's where it ties into the psychological.
Therefore, I have to teach everybody a lesson because she's mine. Okay,
Yeah.
The world does not revolve around you, and people are not property.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too with most domestic abusers, and if you're one, you're listening to this podcast, go fuck yourself. Secondly, you're only tough to your woman, quote unquote, because she lets you get away with it, and or I shouldn't say lets. The wrong terminology. Because as Melissa brought up, the dynamics between men and women, most of the time, you guys are fucking just wimps and can't even stand up to somebody, to a man. If a man stepped up to you, you'd back the hell down. And Tom would in an instant, I'd like to think. Unless he had some liquid courage or raging, just
I don't know. Tom's
mental
pretty
issues. Yeah.
batshit crazy, so he might not.
He's
He
so
might not.
disillusioned on everything. I don't think he has any concept of him not being the old. I am so excited to see Tom and Henry Bowers in the same room. I want to see them meet each other at Dairy
Hi, I'm
Home
Tom.
Hospital.
Hi, I'm Henry.
At the
Excellent.
pub or whatever. Like whatever it is. Those two, which I really will get into, they're going to meet. That's going to be some fireworks.
Good or bad? Like they're going to be buddies, or it's going to be like they're going to be their own little showdown?
Unfortunately, I think they're going to end up being pals.
Oh, that's sad.
But I want it to be just two fucking bullhead dick men show up, can't stand to be in the same room together because they're playing the same card, and basically at least one takes the other out, because I don't think I would imagine it's going to be Bowers taking out.
Although
taking
here's
out
what's
Tom.
funny, like we said, he's soft and broken now. So
Oh, he's coming back though.
you think so?
I think
Okay.
that switch has been flipped.
All right. Well, let's talk about Tom buying the damn car. How did he have $6,000 in his wallet? Like,
It's her money.
He has access to her money.
Okay.
He froze her accounts before she,
okay.
So
She even said that she was like, I need to get out, or she didn't bring anything with her because she knew she wouldn't have access to it very soon after.
Or she
right?
wrote the check for Kay and said, you need to go cash it before he freezes the
Right.
accounts.
Yes,
That's what.
that's right.
Yeah, and there was about she said from the phone call to the time he showed up was like an hour or so that's plenty of time to.
No, it was a whole day.
No, I'm saying from the time of when
Yes.
Tom called to Kay.
But there was a whole day of waiting in between.
Yes, so there's a day and whatever for that. So there's plenty of time for him to go to the bank and pull that cash out.
Yeah.
My note on the car, it's the same kind of wagon from Vacation, National Lampoon's.
Oh, is it a
Vacation.
Ford LTD?
Nice.
Ford LTD. It was 76 in the book, 79 in the movie, but same make and model at least. Had to look that one up because I was thinking, is that the same kind we had as kids? I don't think we had the Ford.
I just think it's funny that when he was talking to the guy that he was buying the car from, and they're like, "Oh yeah, my face. We went roller skating. My wife and I went roller skating, and I took a tumble." Remember when roller skating wasn't an ironic thing, but like actually a viable excuse for that?
Yeah.
I thought that was a funny callback.
And then that's just what Tom needs: a 50-mile long drive in silence to help him clear his thoughts.
With no outside distractions to make him actually, maybe see a perspective.
Right.
I actually had a quick thought on the roller skating thing. Him quickly fabricating an injury. It's so ingrained in who he is and how he's lessened Bev to be over time. I think he definitely has created some stories as to where these bruises and injuries have come from, right? She's not always making that up. Sometimes he says, oh, and this is what happened to you as to why you look beat up this time. It's just so naturally in character for him to just have that. We've seen he's a pretty sharp guy. He's pretty quick. He's got he's clever, right? And he's quick-witted, and it just rolls off the tongue so quick. And it wasn't like he was sitting around thinking, okay, well, I need to figure out what these. I have to talk about it now. This is what it is. Because he's so used to doing that for Bev in the past. I just thought that was a kind of an interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah, and with that,
same
like I said,
thing,
I think he would come up with the ideas for Bev of how her injuries happened because they'd have to be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Because if one person talked Bev and she said this and Tom said, oh yeah, she did that, raises suspicion. So they have to be.
Yeah, and somebody buys this shitty car and the kid takes the plates off. He's like, I'll pay that, I'll buy that screwdriver for $3 too. We know he's going to go steal some plates. That screwdriver is being used again on somebody is something I'll say right now.
Check Chekhov's gun.
Yep, Chekhov's screwdriver. That's all I got.
There you go.
All right. Anybody else, anything else here?
My only other note is here's hoping Bev gets the message.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So remember earlier podcasts, not earlier tonight, but earlier in podcasts when we said, oh, our adult fears are too abstract and it's really hard for someone to find something for Pennywise to latch onto. I lied. I was wrong. My fear as women are men like Tom. Like, truthfully.
Entirely fair. Because it's too common and too real that's what's so terrifying about it.
Yeah,
you don't see huge mummies or lagoon monsters.
And there's very little repercussions.
Yeah, the scariest thing is how easy it is to get away with it.
Yep, and how devastating it is for the women's lives. Like, and not just because of the attack and the physical abuse, but then like the retributions on your job and your livelihood and your home life and like all of it. So, yay.
At least now you know,
That's it, I found it.
I hope you never have to face your fear.
Yep, let's go for that. That's why I grew up with brothers, right? That's your job.
That is our job.
Oh, yeah.
So, let's get into our questions and or comments for the new reader.
I couldn't come up with anything on this one.
I have nothing.
Yeah, this was a tough.
It's pretty
chapter.
straightforward.
Yeah, pretty straighthtforward. Pretty. Yeah. Is Tom making stops? Bo wearing? Yeah.
I mean, there's like nothing scary. There's nothing dairy happening here.
It's just Tom.
Yeah.
He's
questions and comments from the new reader.
One really quick. I got one
sure.
really quick. Do we see Kay again?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think she's going to Derry.
Okay.
Go on down to Derry. Oh, wait.
It's a big fucking mistake.
Stay home.
Stay home. Stay as long.
Where's my anti-muggle
Stay
repellent?
here. Stay as long as you can. Questions and or comments from the new reader. Kind of like you guys are saying, there's not a whole lot of Pennywise directly in here other than maybe he's got something with Tom. I don't think so. I think that's what makes Tom so terrible and terrifying is he's just unfortunately, average fucking example of this real thing. It's a real type of person out there, a real type of man out there, and it doesn't need Pennywise, which is the scarier fucking part. It doesn't need that amplification that Pennywise does for horrible, horrendous things. It just is that bad. And my only other comment here is I apologize if I offend anybody with the comments I made earlier. I truly didn't intend to. It's, again, something that I have very, very little experience with, and it was just a thought process that I had while trying to learn about this in the purveyal of this story. So please write in and let us know if we're missing a point, if I missed a big point that you would like to
Same for me.
bring to light for us. We would love to learn more about it, and we're here to be team players, and we are absolutely on your side. So let's get into our favorite things. Melissa, what was your favorite thing?
Listen to me, said Kay, not unkindly. I'm calling you from Chicago, and I'm trying to reach a woman friend of mine who has just left her husband and gone back to Derry where she grew up. Her husband knows where she went. He got the information out of me by beating the living shit out of me. That man is a psycho. She needs to know he's coming. I
can't pick anything better than that. That is my favorite thing in this chapter as well. So I'm going to cop out and say it's exactly what you just said, because it is. That is the best part of this chapter by far. Because there's so many fucking awful parts.
Yeah, with a caveat of Gary Home or whatever the next line I would add into that where the caller.
It was so the next line says there was a long pause, and then the directory assistance operator said in a decidedly more human voice, "I think the number you really need is the Derry Police Department."
I'm gonna need that too.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take that too. That's next.
That whole section, I like that.
Same here, and I'm gonna give an honorable mention because I can't disagree with that either, Melissa. But I have a quote here. It's, "I'll say this just once," Geffen said. His voice was low and pleasant. "When I work in the ER, my turn in the barrel, you might say, I see maybe 24 battered women a week. The interns treat 24 more. So look, there's a telephone right here on the desk. It's my dime. You call the 6th Street, give them your name and address, tell them what happened and who did it. Then you hang up, and I'll take the bottle of bourbon I keep over there in the file cabinet, strictly for medicinal purposes, you understand, and we'll have a drink on it, because I happen to think, this is just my personal opinion, that the only lower form term of life than a man who would beat a woman is a rat with syphilis.
I'll take the rat with syphilis.
Yeah. Because, and it's, again, another, going back to our point, of very few good adult male characters. I think Dr. Geffen is one of those truly good characters. He sees it. He sees what's going on. He just wants to help. He just doesn't understand what happened, and Kay's not giving him the info.
Mostly because he thinks it's a typical battered spouse, and this is anything but typical, at least the causes behind it.
Exactly.
So that does it for this set of sections. Please follow us on Twitter at FloatsDownHere. We are also on Instagram as at FloatsDownHere. Send us an email. A digital clown? We don't have
no clowns here.
No.
Digital balloon.
A digital balloon. Send us a digital balloon floating against the wind to floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Check out all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com. Also check out our Support Us page, where we have a lot of different cool ways that you can buy merchandise, give a one-time donation. Any little bit you can do really, really helps us out. Check out our Surviving the Summer Amazon items list. And we'll get a small little cut from Amazon if you buy any of those items. We would truly, truly appreciate it. Help keep the lights on here. Subscribe, like, rate, and leave comments on iTunes and YouTube. Those kinds of things go a long, long way to helping other people find our show as well.
One other way you can help support us is by going to patreon.com/stayimaginary. We did start up a Patreon. To those who would like to support us a little bit more, we do offer benefits and bonuses, such as getting access to show notes, early releases, special content for different shows, which we will be working on more for this one as well. It just, it does go a long way to helping us, as Luke said, keep the lights on, just make things a little easier for us on our end. But if not, just make sure you share us and like us where you can, because it always helps out.
We will see you again in 2 weeks, where we finish Chapter 12 with sections 6, 7, 8, and 9.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.